This podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Bogosity. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Bogosity. Welcome to the podcast for the 25th of April 2016, the podcast that does the funky gibbon. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's ingratiate the news of the bogus. So we're hearing en masse from leftists wanting to raise the minimum wage because without minimum wage, companies would only pay their workers 10 cents an hour because competition totally doesn't work in the labor market. Except, of course, when it does. Target is raising its starting wage to $10 an hour to compete with Walmart for the best workers it can get. Walmart had already raised its lowest starting wage to $10, the second year in a row it's increased. They made this move to improve customer service and compensate workers for additional responsibilities, including helping shoppers navigate smartphone apps, manning the self-checkout registers, and filling orders made online. So to compete, Target is giving its workers similar raises, which start in May, based on the new $10 an hour starting pay after having raised it to $9 a year ago. So once again, we see the bogosity of the minimum wage woos about how if it weren't for minimum wage, companies would only be paying their workers 10 cents an hour and all that. We're also seeing what it takes for workers to be paid more. Increased productivity. In this case, productivity associated with e-commerce and smartphone technology. And of course, it takes competition. I'll never know what goes on in the diseased mind of state cultists that makes them think that supply and demand doesn't work in the labor market for some strange reason. The enemy to these workers is not capitalism, but government, which piles on taxes and regulations which make it more expensive to employ people, and requirements which basically make it a penalty for them to work full-time hours. If they really cared about helping the workers, they'd eliminate these costs, and they could do so with a stroke of a pen. They don't, because it's not about helping the workers. They're the ones exploiting the workers for no other reason than their own political agendas. Say, if you're tired of the promos in this podcast, well, the patrons got it early and with no ads or promos. Just go to patreon.bogosity.tv and donate at any level.
Hi, I'm Dave. You may recognize me from previous Bogosity episodes. I'm also part of a podcast, the Superplugs Brothers Podcast. Head on over to superplugsbros.com. You can check out the podcast for video games and pro wrestling. We also have news, reviews, and editorials and all kinds of stuff just to talk about video games and pro wrestling and everything else that comes in between. So if you're into that, why don't you come check us out?
So this one's a bit interesting. Apparently, corrupt politicians in Brazil have voted to impeach Brazil's President Dilma Rousseff for doing exactly the same kind of thing that they were. One of them was Bruno Araújo, who was implicated by a document indicating he may have received illegal funds from the very construction giant at the center of Brazil's corruption scandal. But Araújo belongs to the PSDB party, whose nominees have lost 4 straight national elections to the PT party of Rousseff. They've spent 2 decades trying and failing to defeat PT democratically, so they're trying to use the scandal to remove Dilma on grounds that, a report in the New York Times shows, are iffy at best. Even The Economist, which has continually spoken out against PT and wants Dilma to resign, said, quote, "In the absence of proof of criminality, impeachment is unwarranted," and that this whole proceeding, quote, "looks like a pretext for ousting an unpopular president." The proceedings were presided over House Speaker Eduardo Cunha, generally considered to be one of the most corrupt politicians in Brazil. He was recently found to have hidden millions of ill-gotten dollars in Swiss bank accounts and lied under oath when he denied the existence of these bank accounts to investigators. There are 594 members of Brazil's Congress, and according to the Globe and Mail, quote, 318 are under investigation or face charges. But Rousseff herself, quote, faces no allegation of financial impropriety. As The Guardian's Jonathan Watts reports, quote, yes, voted Paulo Maluf, who is on Interpol's red list for conspiracy. Yes, voted Nilton Kapexaba, who is accused of money laundering. For the love of God, yes, declared Silas Camara, who is under investigation for forging documents and misappropriating public funds. If the Senate agrees to hear the charges, and it seems likely they will, it will mean a mandatory 180-day suspension for Dilma, during which time Vice President Mikkel Temer of the PMDB party will take the reins, even though he, according to the New York Times, is, quote, under scrutiny over claims that he was involved in an illegal ethanol purchasing scheme. It's the same tactic we see everywhere, as Glenn Greenwald explains, quote, many suspect that one core objective in impeaching Dilma is to provide a cathartic sense for the public that corruption has been addressed, all designed to exploit Temer's newfound control to prevent further investigations of the dozens upon dozens of actually corrupt politicians populating the leading parties. It's all about having a scapegoat, you see. Greenwald also goes into America's involvement, after denying that it had any part in the 1964 coup that removed Brazil's elected government in favor of 20 years of martial law, which was very favorable to the U.S. But, as Greenwald explains, quote, secret documents and recordings emerged proving that the U.S. actively helped plot that coup, and the country's 2014 Truth Commission report documented that the U.S. and UK aggressively supported the dictatorship and even trained Brazilian interrogators in torture techniques. One of the frontrunners to replace Dilma if she's thrown out of office is Jair Bolsonaro, who praised that military dictatorship and specifically hailed their chief torturer Alberto Brilhante Ustra, who was even responsible for the torture of Dilma herself in 1970, when she was subjected to electric shocks and even hung naked upside down while her wrists and ankles were bound. Bolsonaro's son, House member Eduardo Bolsonaro, said he cast his impeachment vote, quote, for the military men of 64, in other words, those who carried out that very same martial law. Dilma, however, doesn't have much love from the U.S. government, especially after vociferously denouncing NSA spying. I don't know if it's cold comfort or a crying shame that the very same scapegoating and fake scandals go on everywhere, for the sake of covering the hideous crimes of those in power. Probably a bit of both. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. We've talked before about how inaccurate drug-sniffing dogs are. The issue is not that dogs can't smell drugs, they can, but it's hard to get them to understand that's what they're supposed to do. According to dogs, they're supposed to please their master, and if they can please their master with a false alert, that's exactly what they'll do. So now we've got a story from the UK about how they're not really detecting drugs, but according to one portion of a 50-page report from the UK's Independent Inspector of Borders and Immigration, they're much more likely to find cheese and sausage. Quote, although the dogs were making detections, they were not delivering effectively against control strategy priorities. The dogs had made no Class A drug detections in the period November 2014 to June 2015. They had made multiple accurate detections, but most were of small amounts of cheese or sausages wrongly brought back by returning British holidaymakers and posing minimal risk to UK public health. But there were 6 detections of the Class B drugs human growth hormone, Viagra, and bromazepam. Is it just me, or is this sounding kind of random? I mean, if I'd had a bit of cheese on me, the drug dog triggered, and they searched my bags, they'd find my perfectly legal and prescribed hydrocodone, which I take for chronic pain. Search enough people, and you're gonna find prescription drugs. Really, guys, why don't you just use dowsing rods? They're cheaper. I mean, just 6 dogs have apparently cost the agency £1.25 million, not including maintenance costs. And all it's resulted in is drug smugglers getting the drugs into the country in ways that let them avoid encounters with drug dogs. Really, at this point, what are these dogs other than a way for police to conduct otherwise invalid searches and make money through civil asset forfeiture? Hackers, terrorists, the NSA. But I repeat myself. Your online security is under attack, and the weakest point is your password. That's why you need LastPass. LastPass plugs into your browser and allows you to randomly generate strong, unique passwords anywhere on the web, all protected by one master password. LastPass sets up in minutes and gives you secure automatic logins throughout the web, synchronizing across all your browsers and all your computers, at home, at work, or on the road. It even securely stores sensitive form data, including credit card numbers, backup sensitive documents, membership info, Wi-Fi logins, and more. And with LastPass Premium, you can get these benefits on other applications and even mobile devices, and also get priority customer support. Sign up at password.bogosity.tv for a free month of LastPass Premium. Log in securely everywhere using the last password you'll ever have to remember. Go to password.bogosity.tv and get LastPass now. And now it's time to de-exempt this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Way back when we covered the Affordable Care Act, Tim Dyson pointed out that all you really needed to know to evaluate any country's government healthcare plan is if politicians exempted themselves and their cronies. Well, not only did Congress exempt themselves, it now seems, based on documents released under the Freedom of Information Act, that they broke the law to do it. In fact, they broke a lot of laws, apparently. So what happens is, there's a taxpayer subsidy of up to $12,000 for healthcare premiums for federal employees. Those don't apply to the ACA exchanges for individuals, but they can get them through shop exchanges. That's the Small Business Health Options Program. So Congress did just that. Signed everyone up through DC's SHOP program so they can get the taxpayer subsidy that you and I aren't allowed to get. The problem is, as the name implies, this is only for small businesses, and the ACA says that no business with more than 100 employees can participate. DC's Shop Exchange in particular set the limit to 50. So to sign up for this, Congress claimed that the 435-member House had only 45 members and 45 staffers, and the 100-member Senate had 45 employees total. That's government math for you, people. By the way, knowingly making false statements on matters concerning congressional compensation is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Not only that, but making false claims against the U.S. Treasury is a separate crime, punishable by fines of up to 3 times the amount drawn from the Treasury and or up to 20 years in prison. Also, healthcare fraud is a sentence of 10 years, Sarbanes-Oxley's ban on falsifying financial documents can get you 20 years, conspiracy to commit these offenses gets you 5 years, and that's not to mention numerous other crimes under federal and DC law. And yet, even in their 2015 applications, congressional officials continue to make these deliberately false statements. Different rules for thee than for me. What else could make someone lead the pack as this week's biggest Bogon emitter? Now you can make Amazon purchases with Bitcoin by going to purse.bogosity.tv. That's P-U-R-S-E. Moreover, most purchases can be made at a discount. Save an average of 20% just by buying from Purse, or get even greater discounts by linking your Amazon wish list. Go to purse.bogosity.tv. Bogosity.tv is a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates Program, an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for sites to earn advertising fees by advertising and linking to Amazon.com. Just clear your cookies and go to Amazon.bogosity.tv, or check the right-hand side of the podcast page for Amazon's best deals, including the deal of the day and limited-time lightning deals on all sorts of great products. So next time you buy online, go to Amazon.bogosity.tv. And now let's firewall this week's Extraordinaire. And after several podcasts where we praised Apple's security on their newer iPhones, we now have to throw brickbats at them. Apple has discontinued all updates for the Windows version of their QuickTime media player, despite there being known active vulnerabilities. The latest update for the Windows QuickTime app was January, and it looks like that will be the last, according to Trend Micro in a recent blog post. Quote, "We're putting the word out that everyone should follow Apple's guidance and uninstall QuickTime for Windows as soon as possible. This is for two reasons. First, Apple is deprecating QuickTime for Microsoft Windows. They will no longer be issuing security updates for the product on the Windows platform and recommend users uninstall it. Note that this does not apply to QuickTime on Mac OS X. Second, our zero-day initiative has just released two advisories detailing two new critical vulnerabilities affecting QuickTime for Windows. These advisories are being released in accordance with the zero-day initiative's disclosure policy for when a vendor does not issue a security patch for a disclosed vulnerability. And because Apple is no longer providing security updates for QuickTime on Windows, these vulnerabilities are never going to be patched. The only way to protect your Windows systems from potential attacks against these or other vulnerabilities in Apple QuickTime now is to uninstall it. So you can do that and use a good video player like VLC to play QuickTime files. Even if you're using iTunes, it's been using its own separate player for several versions now. The problem is there are some people, like me, who need it so that I can render .mov files for my clients that demand them. It's even required by many tools like DaVinci Resolve and Pro Tools. So what are we supposed to do? And what's worse is that Apple isn't even telling people about this. We have to hear about it secondhand from Trend Micro, who only know about it because of the Zero Day Initiative, or ZDI. Last November, ZDI reported the two vulnerabilities and Apple acknowledged them. February 29th, ZDI requested a status update from Apple, who got back to them on March 8th, inviting them to a call, which happened on the 9th. In that call, Apple advised ZDI that QuickTime for Windows is being deprecated, the current version will not be patched, and these two vulnerabilities will remain 0 days. When ZDI asked what users should do, Apple gave them a link to the QuickTime uninstallation instructions. And yet, Apple still offers it for download from their site. There should be a duty of care when it comes to software, especially when you have a case like Apple, whose Vice President A.V. Tavanian Jr. complained that Microsoft was sabotaging QuickTime and therefore should have an antitrust action against them. But now that QuickTime is everywhere, Apple can just abandon it, even when they know there are vulnerabilities in it. But this is really Apple's MO. Unlike Microsoft and Google, they don't announce end of life in advance. They just abandon products at the drop of a hat. And that's more than enough to make Apple this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this did I do that? Oopsie! Edition of the Bogosity podcast. Come join the discussion at forum.bogosity.tv and feel free to join in by sending a question, statement, news article, or rant in text or audio to podcast@bogosity.tv. This podcast depends on you to keep going, so please donate using the links on the website or the QR codes on the YouTube video. You can also become a patron at patreon.bogosity.tv and get the podcast and YouTube videos early and without ads or promos. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Daniel Webster. Labor in this country is independent and proud. It has not to ask the patronage of capital, but capital solicits the aid of labor. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.
Want answers to creationist claims against evolution? Would you like to know more about evolution yourself, or even engage creationists more directly, with actual peer-reviewed sources to back you up? My book, How Evolution is Scientific, is designed to show the basics of evolutionary theory and how it is so well supported using the scientific method. It's impeccably sourced, with references to the actual scientific material, and is arranged using the creationists' own criteria of what is scientific. Using their own arguments against them, see how evolution is scientific, but creationism is not, based on observations, accurate predictions, logic, and evidence. Get answers to common creationist claims, and even a primer on abiogenesis, the start of all life. It's all in my book, How Evolution is Scientific, available at Amazon and on Kindle, EPUB, and PDF as well. Get How Evolution is Scientific and never be taken in by creationists again.